Hello, America. Today's show topics include the Las Vegas massacre and the many questions that I have come up with. Also, Boy Scouts to let girls join. Congress has its own pharmacy. What? Yes, that's right. And on top of that, California is just plain silly. Look, we've got a lot to cover tonight, so sit back, buckle up, and hang on. Because, that's right, we're just getting started.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.
You know what time it is, so sit back and get ready for the Stafford Voice, your dose of conservative in a world of liberal.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Daniel.
And Roxanne.
And you're watching or listening to the Stafford Voice, where we are conservative in a world of liberal. Look, I want to remind you there are many ways to tune in. So, set this channel as a favorite. Whatever you have to do so you don't get left behind. Because if for some strange, crazy reason you do miss the show, you'll be able to catch the replay, so just sit tight. There is no need to panic because, hey, we got you. And just make sure you subscribe. It's the easiest way to stay caught up on anything and everything that gets put out. In the case you aren't already following over on social media, you can find us over on Gab or Twitter. That's right, Twitter or Gab at Stafford Voice. Or you can find us on Facebook or Instagram or any other social site of your choosing, wherever, whenever. Just search for the Stafford Voice, and, well, we're probably there. Also, since you're out on the interwebs, do yourself and myself a favor. Head over to thestaffordvoice.com so you can stay up to date. Now, I'm noticing quite a few of you in the chats over on the YouTube side. I haven't seen anybody pop up from the, where else are we streaming? The Twitch side. So let me just give a couple of shout-outs. We got Slick, we got Tina, we've got Jessica, we've got Jess. I assume that Daniel is there. We got Baby Gavin, we got Ron. Did I miss anybody? We got Mr. and Mrs. Lego.
Alan?
I didn't say Al?
I don't know.
I don't know if I said Al or not. Al, what's up? He's kind of hunkered down where he's at. It's kind of crazy from what I heard.
Kentucky Ron's there.
I see that Kentucky Ron is there. I said what's up to Ron.
Oh.
You're too busy watching. Quit watching your screen. Pay attention to what people are saying.
KLR.
Oh no, KLRN radio's there. We better be on our good behavior. Okay. Speaking of good behavior, listen, I know that I told you guys this last week that this was honestly one of those stories that I stayed away from. We got Justin in the house as well. I wanted to stay away from this story, and that is Las Vegas. But as things transpired, it just didn't quite sit right with me. So I decided to jump into it and see what was going on. I decided to take a look. At the behest of some friends, it kind of alerted me to start in one particular area. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to divulge any confidential sources or anything like that. I keep those rather close. Excuse me, I feel like I've still got some of that sinus crap that's going on. I don't know why.
It doesn't help that the weather's been kind of wet lately, too.
Yeah, that's true.
It's yucky.
I've been trying to take it easy, trying to rest my throat, keep my sinuses cleared out. But I think maybe it's because I haven't done too good of a job of resting And by that, I mean sleep. I have not gotten a lot of sleep over the last, since probably Sunday?
Yeah, I was thinking like a week ago. It feels like it's been a long time.
It's been a while. It does seem like it's been a while. However, I really think I dove into this on Friday night. Yeah, I really did. I dove into this. When I dive into things, I tend to maybe not go a little overboard. But I have 7 typed out pages, 6.5 typed out pages of notes that I really don't know how to approach this with you guys, other than just basically reading to you my notes. I basically just want to read to you my notes, because my thoughts are pretty much scattered all over on this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it all out. And look, nobody is taking the risk other than myself. Yeah, I'm not the big guy on the waves. I'm not that guy. And I'm okay with that. But every now and then you have to take a risk. And I feel like I'm doing that with this. I'm not a conspiracy guy. Every now and then, I'll kind of look at them. I'll kind of look at the conspiratorial type things. But I think, and listen, the goal of this show is what? I got 3 E's, and you guys know this. It's to educate, entertain, and engage. I've been engaging like crazy lately with some of you guys. I feel like lately we've been doing a good job with entertaining. We've had some pretty silly stories that we've brought to you. But right here, right now, this is what I want to do. I know that a lot of you guys have a lot of questions, many of which I'm going to propose that I feel you guys have expressed some of the same concerns. And I hope that if you don't have as many questions, that by the end of tonight, you look at things with your eyes a little more open. That's my hope and my wish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through some of my notes. And I'm basically going to take you on my journey. Now, most of this was just a mind dump. I just got this stuff out of my head so I could chronicle it, so I would be able to look at it and try and piece things together, because a lot of this right now is just playing connect the dots. Now, let me start with where I started Friday night. Friday night, I wrote to myself this: things just don't add up. And again, this is just me dumping stuff out. I want to apologize for this method of communication. It seems rather weird and somewhat cryptic to do so, but in order to keep some level of sanity and order in my life, this is what we get. Again, I've spent some time reviewing video after video, running the scenarios in my head over and over again, and I still come to the same conclusion. Not one piece adds up. Take into account the first shots fired. They weren't fully automatic shots. They were single shots. Maybe they were leader shots to see if he was on target. But the timeline of shooting after those initial shots are baffling. The initial tracking shots, if you will, were minutes ahead of the automatic fire. Let me say that again. Minutes. I've acquired enough targets downrange to know that in the heat of the battle, you send your markers, and when you know you're on target, you unload. This doesn't seem to happen in this exchange. Why? Of all the video footage I've watched, I can't find a single video that shows a single shot of muzzle flash coming from the reported area of the Mandalay Bay. Not one single video shows it, and yes, in the video you can hear the automatic weapon being fired. Why is there not a visible muzzle flash? Now again, this was at 10 o'clock at night. There should have been some muzzle flash, regardless of whatever floor you're on. Wherever you're at, you should have been able to see some muzzle flash. With that type of rounds being slung down range, I'm sorry, but why is there not a visible muzzle flash? Sounds. One thing we're trained to do is be situationally aware of our surroundings. That means being able to notice where sounds are coming from, even being able to think on the fly how far the sounds are from where we are. In all of the video footage I've seen, the gunfire sounds as if it's coming from different areas with relation to the Mandalay Bay. There is, however, one video from a cab driver, and I talk about this cab driver a couple of times. One video from a cab driver situated in the drive lane for the cabs that sounds as if the shots are coming from directly above, which would make sense considering the location of the cab in relation to the supposed 32nd floor. However, the cab driver video has what could be echoes of the gunfire. I've been to Las Vegas. It's a rather noisy place. With the distance between the buildings, the odd shapes, and the relative noise level, it doesn't seem consistent to have the echoes as they appear to sound on the cab driver video. The supposed suite where Paddock carried out the shootings aren't consistent with the reports. They even don't make sense given the pictures of the suite. Let's start with the idea that they breached the door. Okay, I get that. Breached, as in they made a forced entry. Two things alarm me right off the cuff. First, we're told, or at least I read in multiple reports, one of which was the 60 Minutes story, that the officers used explosives. Now, I know explosives. It's what I did while in the Army. The pictures of the double door entry to the suite shows one of the doors knocked off its hinges. There appears to be no sign of explosive used to breach the door. This brings me to my next point on the entry door. Why are there bullet holes in the entry door that appear to have come from the hallway rather than from the inside? This seems to be contrary to their initial report. The element of surprise is gone at this point. Rigging for explosives gives you the element of surprise. Second, the images that are leaked from inside the suite. In the picture, we see plenty of spent casings and weapons strewn about. Why would the casings be all over the place? I've spent enough time at a firing range policing spent cartridges to know they don't travel like a drunk tourist. Weapons shown in the leaked pictures aren't consistent with the sounds in the videos. The weapons also aren't consistent to the rate of fire which we hear in the videos. True, the maximum effective area target for a standard issue M16 is, if memory serves me correct, 600 meters. In preliminary calculations, Paddock would have been shooting in the range of 500 to 600 meters. To someone who isn't trained in distance shooting and automatic shooting, the odds would be completely stacked against you if, in fact, he did have a note on the table for elevation and bullet drop, basically a sniper's card. Things only an experienced shooter would know how to interpret on the fly. How was Paddock able to do it? I won't get into the picture of Paddock laying on the ground with a pool of blood around his head. I'll admit I don't know the first thing about suicide forensics. I do find it rather interesting that the picture shows the reported revolver used is about 1.5 feet from his head. I also find it rather interesting that there appears to be a stain on his t-shirt. That just so happens to have the appearance of a large blood stain. To me, there are far too many inconsistencies that just don't add up. There are way too many questions. Now, those notes right there compiled from everything from Friday night and all day Saturday. Now, let's continue. It continues to baffle me. I don't know why this entire story is bothering me so much. Is it because there's enough to question the validity of what is being reported? Am I thinking my way into a frenzy? Am I searching for truth, or have I gone crazy in search of the truth? Conspiracy? All of that aside, there are things that continue to baffle me. Earlier this morning, I couldn't escape out of my mind the idea of body cams. We all know that the Las Vegas is one of the most covered areas with cameras, and one would conclude that their police force has body cams. Why come to that conclusion? Remember, there was a video that was posted of a body cam where the officers were talking about how, quote, they're firing at us, or in our direction. I can't remember word for word exactly what he was saying. Where is the police body cam footage? Here's an answer to that question. Here is a valid answer to that question that I'm asking.
Okay.
Where is the police body cam footage? Okay, let's realize that for 1 second that, again, Las Vegas is one of the most heavily cameraed areas, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere we looked, there were cameras.
That was a long time ago.
And that was a while ago. And this was before the body cam, the whole body cam thing where we needed to force police officers, to have body cams.
For their safety.
For everyone's safety.
Well, yeah, but okay.
Okay. So here's the thing. You have one hotel. Let's just look at one hotel.
Okay.
Mandalay Bay. Just starting on the main floor, you have hundreds and hundreds of cameras. Now, how many police officers were in the area? Every single one of them probably had a body cam on. We have hours upon hours upon hours of camera footage to go through. So, I'm not going to hold that one against them.
Okay.
Now, I see that in the chat they're talking about tracers.
I know this may sound really stupid and I don't know much, but what exactly are tracers?
A tracer. Okay, so, and this kind of goes along with something that I hope I can remember. Remind me when I get way, way down here and I start talking about the jet fuel storage tanks.
Okay.
Ask me the question about tracers then.
Okay.
Okay, so keep that one in the back of your mind. Okay, where was I? Also, there are audio files out from the police scanners talking about the event. During the audio, they talk about how there are / could be multiple shooters. The officers heard on the radios kept talking about Mandalay Bay. One officer said it was coming from about a third of the way up. Another said halfway. There are also reports that there was gunfire coming from both the 29th and the 32nd floors. Even the chat on the scanners talk about the possibilities of multiple shooters. Now, I have a somewhat partial transcript of the police scanners. In this partial transcript, they talk about another hotel or resort or whatever you call it. They talk, there's reference in there about the Tropicana.
I don't remember that hotel.
Well, we didn't spend a lot of time way down on the south end.
We didn't go that far, right?
No, we walked down there once and walked back. Now remember, the size of the blocks. You remember how big a block is
It took
in
forever to
Las
walk.
Vegas. It is crazy. Crazy long. They're almost half a mile to 3/4 of a length, 3/4 of a mile in length, right?
Yeah, they tell you to walk next door, but you.
They tell you to walk next door, right? They tell you to walk next door, but it takes forever to get there. Okay. Now, where did I leave off? Okay, what else can we attain from the police scanner traffic is when they are breaching the door. You hear the term breach the door and immediately confirm the suspect is down. Just how much was the audio edited? I'm not sure. I would rather hear the entire recording of the raw audio to make my own conclusions. More video is being uploaded and released from inside and around the venue. Noticeably, one of them is the very start of things. In the video, Jason Aldean is on stage performing. When the first shots are heard, it's a long and steady stream of gunfire, enough that Aldean stopped immediately and rushed off the stage. The crowd goes quiet, and there's an audible uh-oh from someone near the camera. Based on the initial amount of rounds fired, why does it seem that nobody is fazed? It doesn't appear that anyone is hit or injured or crying out. Were those warning shots? Tracer rounds? Tracer shots? Was the shooter trying to hit the jet fuel storage tanks? That's not right, but that's not when it's much later. Now, I've listened to and watched the cab driver's video multiple times and have the same thoughts each time. Her video has two distinctly different sounds of gunfire based off the map of the area and trying to approximate her location. Each time gunfire is heard, it should sound as if it's coming from directly above her, yet it doesn't. One set of gunfire does, but not until she moves her cab closer to the main entrance. It's at this point where the sound of gunfire audibly sounds above her at times. You may ask yourself about echoes. Sure, there's echoes, but do echoes come before or after? In the cab driver video, an echo can be heard, or what we might perceive as an echo, that is, until the sounds are audibly above her. When that succession of firing ends, it's clear the difference in echoes. I would conclude that there seems to be more than one shooter. How could one make a conclusion? What if forensic analysis proved that there were at least two different shooters? What if you were able to calculate based off the timing of the shots and echoes to determine such a claim? They're also changing the timeline of when things happened. Aside from the fact that they've changed one day from the 28th to the 25th, they're changing the timeline of the events prior to Paddock's shooting. The claim now is that Paddock shot the hotel security guard a full 6 minutes prior to opening fire on the crowd. I'll get into more of the timeline in just a minute. They also stated in the same report that he fired upwards of 200 rounds into the hallway. How is it that not one person heard this or made a complaint about it? Was it that Paddock rented out half the Mandalay Bay in order to conceal himself? How is it that not one of those 200 or so rounds made it into the room of someone else, or even another person? Again, we find ourselves back at the body of Paddock. If he did all the shooting himself, unassisted, there would be copious amounts of gunpowder residue on him and near where his shooting position was. Also, with regard to the photo that was quote-unquote leaked of him dead on the ground, why the two different degrees of blood? That's in relation to, you've the blood seems to have soaked into the carpet, but then there seems to be fresher blood that's on top of that. There appears to be two different colors of blood, one fresher than the other. Also, where did he shoot himself, and why is the pistol away from his body?
Didn't you say it was like above his head?
It was. It's above his head.
But if it was a suicide, I'm not an expert either, but I'm just saying, if it was a suicide, it would have to be, I would imagine, on the side of his head, but not above,
or even in his
farther
hand,
away.
or even in his hand. Correct?
Yeah, like if he fell, it would still be in his hand, but by his hand, not at the top of his head. That doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't.
But I'm not an expert either, so
none of us here are. I'm just one guy. I'm just a guy asking questions. That's all.
Well,
I'm not an expert at this at all.
But we may not be an expert, but I would imagine there would be some common sense. I mean, if you sit there and you think about if a person puts the gun to the side of their head or even to their mouth, I mean, they're going to fly above the top of their head.
I don't know.
I mean, I don't know either.
physics tells you that everything goes down when that the gravity pulls everything down. A pistol isn't going to go above you.
Kind of fly back behind
you.
It
doesn't. No. I'm sorry. That really does not make sense. And if anybody out there knows forensics guys that understand any of this,
I think,
by all means, let me know. I would love to talk to them and try and piece together this stuff. Not really for anybody else's gain, but for my own. I want to understand this myself. Okay. As you can see, there are many questions that keep adding to an already long list, all of which still continue to baffle me. And that's without contemplating where there could have been other shooting positions and what the motive could have been. Okay. We're like, oh boy. Now we're catching up to what's this? Tuesday's stuff. Okay, here's what I compiled on Tuesday. What happens in the hotel stays in the hotel. I continue to be plagued by the talk of the timeline of it all. 9:59. Hotel security guard is shot by Paddock on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino. 10:05. First shots fired on music festival. This was seen on closed-circuit television from the concert venue. Yet, there's not one video that proves this. That it came from the Mandalay Bay. 10:12 p.m. First two officers arrive on the 31st floor and announce that the gunfire is coming from directly above them. 10:15. The last shots are fired by Paddock. 10:17. The first two officers arrive on the 32nd floor. 1 minute later, security officer tells police he was shot and gives location of the gunman's room. 10:26, roughly between 10:26 and 10:30, 8 additional officers arrive on the 32nd floor and begin to move down the hallway, clearing every room and looking for any injured people. They no longer hear gunfire. I want you to remember these times. At 10:55, 8 officers arrive in the stairwell at the opposite end of the hallway nearest to Paddock's room. 11:20. 11:20, an hour after the security officer tells them that he was shot and tells them where the gunman's room is. The officers enter the room. They see Paddock on the ground and a second door that could not be accessed from their position. 11:27, a second breach is set off, allowing officers to enter the second room. Officers quickly realize there is no one else in the rooms and announce over the radio that the suspect is down. If we are led to believe that Paddock was the shooter and that he shot the hotel security guard a full 6 minutes before opening fire on those at the music festival, how was this not relayed back to the police? If it's true that he fired some 200 rounds into the hallway, anyone with sense would have relayed this information to their superiors, who in turn would have contacted the police. Why the lapse? Paddock fired down on the crowd for 10 minutes, and in those 10 minutes, 7 minutes into his gunfire, there were already police on the floor below saying it was coming from the floor above. All of the video that has been posted shows a crowd in panic, unaware of the exact location of the shooter or shooters. How is it that they were so quick to descend on Mandalay Bay? Now again, at a normal pace, normal pace, not a rushed, frantic pace. A normal pace, I can cover a half a mile to a mile in 5 to 10 minutes. If I'm frantic and I'm booking it, I can cover half a mile in 3.5 minutes. I can cover a mile in 6.5 minutes to 7 minutes. You're telling me that these police officers Instinct told every single police officer where this sound was coming from, what floor, and it took them 7 minutes from the first shots that were fired. Once the officers arrived on the 32nd floor, how is it that they were completely unaware that the security guard had been shot at? Wouldn't that have been crucial information once they first entered the hotel? I understand the need to search the floor, but why did we search the floor before at least descending on the known whereabouts of the activity? Sure, we know that's the first thing you do is sweep the floor and work your way to the threat. But by this time, the shooting from the room had stopped. Besides, we know where the shooting is coming from, as the hotel security guard was shot at some 200 times. It took them almost an hour to work their way to Paddock's suite before entering. How? Why? It took 7 minutes for them to confirm that there was a suspect down. From the layout of the suite, they would have walked right past a dead Paddock before finding the second room. And speaking of the layout of the suite, things continued to not add up. The main window, the one that is at the end of the suite, not the one on the main facing side of the building, the angled one, is presumably the main shooting position. We come to this conclusion by the facing of the window. It would give the best line of sight for the shooter. However, it's too close to the support pillar. This would be an awkward shooting position for someone who is standing in the prone position. Who is standing. In the prone position, it could be adequate, but the close proximity between the pillar and the window, this couldn't be the case. Sure, the windows are full-length windows, but unless Paddock was a left-handed shooter shooting in the prone position, this would have been difficult. Even more difficult is the idea that he fired, standing up, with automatic weapons, at a distance outside the effective range. Either Paddock was just that damn good of a shot, or he had help. We would assume Paddock is not a left-handed shooter, as it is that in the photos that were leaked show his left hand with a glove on, not holding a weapon. As a matter of fact, the revolver is above his head. How did he shoot himself and have time to release the weapon? Also, in the leaked photo of him shows a weapon at his feet. Interestingly enough, is that his foot is under the weapon. How did this come to be? Did he struggle after taking his own life, or was he dead beforehand? Is that why the security guard was on the floor in the first place? What was the exact call that led the hotel security guard to investigate something on the 32nd floor? I'll come to that in a minute, because that answer was revealed earlier this morning. Maybe there is some truth, after all, to what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. I'm not going to get into the speculation of who was doing insider trading the month leading up to this attack. I'm not going to dive into who would be the financial beneficiary of this, at least not right now. There's far too many questions that need to be answered first. Okay, here's where I leave off. These are the next notes that I read you are what I compiled today, titled 11 Days Later. If you're not questioning everything with this entire story, you are either deaf and blind or just plain stupid. Since this attack first happened, the story and timeline have changed how many times? First, we're told that the hotel security guard was shot during the middle of the entire thing. Then, we're told he was shot 6 minutes prior to the shooter opening fire on the crowd. Not once were we led to think there was anyone else in the hallway with the hotel security guard. Now, 11 days later, we're to learn that there was a maintenance man responding to a call about a fire exit door that wouldn't close. 11 days later, how did we not hear from this guy before? Wouldn't that have been something or someone key in order to corroborate these events? 11 days. If that doesn't raise a flag, I don't know what else does. Remember, again, we're to believe that some 200 rounds were fired into a hallway that's likely only 5 to 6 feet wide, and based off the pictures that were shown, it's really only 4 to 5 feet wide. With two people, and only one of them is hurt. The maintenance guy says he could hear the rounds go by him. Sorry, but it's more prevalent now more than ever that we begin to question everything. Something else interesting to take away was from a combination of the 60 Minutes special and an interview on CBS this morning. They were talking with the guy that did the 60 Minutes special, and he made mention how none of these 4 officers that breached the suite had worked together before. He made mention that they met in the stairwell on their way up to the 32nd floor and formulated their plan on the fly. I totally get that. The CBS This Morning crew asked him about how there were changes made to the way officers handled issues like this after the 2008 Mumbai shooting. The protocol used to be that they would set up a perimeter and work their way slowly to where the active shooter was. Again, that was my question earlier. I was just kind of dumping. Okay? The new protocol is that they make their move toward the active shooter first before anything. This is contrary to the reported timeline. In the timeline, they state that they swept the hallway as the officers made their way toward Paddock's suite, and it was some time before they actively breached the door to the suite. Again, question everything. Yes, he did have cameras in the hall. That's how he supposedly saw the security guard coming down the hallway.
I also heard that he had the cameras there so that he would know when they were coming, and then that's when he shot himself.
At least that's what we're led to believe.
That was at the beginning when this all happened.
Right.
But it was still kind of weird. But
right. I'm following you. Valid question. We should even take into account all the little details that could be, let me stress that again, could be hiding right in plain sight. Take, for instance, the person appointed to lead the investigation on behalf of the FBI, Aaron Rouse. Rouse was appointed by none other than FBI Director at the time, James Comey. Again, this would be speculation at this point. We don't know the motive of Paddock or anyone else connected with this entire story. We don't even know why anyone would want to break into one of Paddock's homes that was being investigated by the FBI. That's right. One of the homes that was investigated, being actively investigated by the FBI, was broken into. Does that make sense? If this story couldn't get any more weird, now the parent company to Mandalay Bay, MGM Resorts, is at odds with the timeline. People from MGM Resorts are saying that the security guard relayed the information down to the security team. They are also unclear if that information was relayed to the police or if it was improperly handled. But don't worry. We're putting assets in place to figure out how he was able to get that many guns into his suite. After all, he was a high roller with access to the freight elevators. Yeah, it's a perk that he may have used. Adding to the confusion, there are no surveillance cameras in the floor's hallways, but only on elevator banks, not the freight elevators. And the timestamps on the hotel's communication systems in some cases may have been off. To me, it's crazy how we know some of the most tiniest of details, yet we can't answer some of the biggest questions of all. There are far too many holes in this entire story for it to be over soon. I'm sorry, I'm not going to let up on this. And I don't think any one of us should. I think at this time, we probably need to question everything. If you have questions, ask them. Because somebody out there might know the answer. I'm sorry, but I mean, since I first started looking at this story, things just did not add up.
Well, when it first happened and they talked about it on the news, I remember being at work, and the first thing that popped in my head that was odd was had no history of like mental problems,
No. And
no criminal background. He was like,
here's the other thing that's baffling about his mental status. They have supposedly scanned his brain and found nothing wrong. As part of the coroner's, what do they call that? Where they look at the body and autopsy.
Yeah. I just thought it was odd because in the past when something like this happens, it's always, well, they've had a criminal record, they've been in trouble with this, they've been in and out of, mental hospitals, or their doctors said this or their doctor said that. And then I just remember that sticking out when I first heard that. I was like, well, that's odd. A total guy who is normal and he just goes and shoots up a concert for no reason?
That's what we're led to believe. And Jessica, I've seen you pop up a couple of times in the chat to have me DM you. I will. You say you have a forensics friend who might be able to shed some light. I'm totally willing to do that. And no, not all mental defects are visible in an autopsy. There's no... Yeah. When I die,
You gonna donate your brain to science?
What little bit is there, I may donate to science because I want them to try and figure out how I was able to function in a somewhat normal setting. Okay? Now...
You're not crazy.
I tend to go bat crap crazy sometimes, and I feel like I've gone a little overboard with this. But I'm sorry, I feel I have the gut instinct that tells me that something else is bigger with this. We're not getting the entire story, and I don't know that we ever will. Now let me. I'm seeing some of the comments popping up right now. Slick says, here's his theory. Paddock was dead. Excuse me. Paddock was dead before the first shot was fired. 2 5-man teams, 1 on the ground. Jessica says, I was thinking 2 3-man teams. I think that there had to have been multiple teams, regardless of how many people were assigned, quote unquote, assigned into a team is one thing. I thought, I thought that there was one video where, or something, I read something somewhere or heard, where somebody had made a comment that there was a vehicle leaving or going the wrong way or doing something, but it wasn't even over in front of Mandalay Bay. It was over by somewhere else.
Like this was all going on, all the shooting?
Right. After the initial shooting started and some time had expired, that there was somebody made the comment that
like a getaway vehicle?
Right. Like there may have been a getaway vehicle. I don't know if it was a getaway vehicle. Don't know. But, yeah, and I know a lot of this stuff sounds like it could be a Hollywood movie.
Like Jason Bourne?
Well, yeah, but Jason Bourne, the guy that Matt Damon, he doesn't like guns. He only likes guns when it helps
fake.
him when it helps him make millions of dollars. So Refill is asking who shot the 200 rounds. Yes, it was quote unquote Paddock. From what we're led to believe, all of the reports are saying that Paddock fired some 200 rounds, and this is both coming from the security guard and now the new maintenance guy that was dispatched to that floor. So yeah, you've got 2 people claiming that there were 200 rounds fired into the hallway. I would tend to agree with that by going back and looking at my notes and remembering that in the leaked photo where the they show the entry door. There was the bifold doors. One of the doors was knocked off its hinges. In that door, you see bullet holes. I've fired enough weapons to know what 200 rounds look like. It doesn't look like 200 rounds went through that single door. The other door doesn't look like it had very much damage in it at all, if any. But I'm saying that, yes, there were bullets sent through the hallway, whether they came from the hallway or they came from inside the room. But from the radio traffic that we hear, we did not hear any of the police officers discharging weapons, at least while they were on the radio asking for permission to breach. Anyway. Yeah, be advised. You need to stay vigilant. Go with your gut. If you don't like the way something sounds, speak up. Dig deeper. You may be the only person that could figure it out and find the truth. I'm not saying that I'm the guy that's going to find the truth, that's going to find answers to all of these questions. Again, I'm just an average guy like you, okay? I'm just an average guy. I'm not a big shot media guy. I wouldn't mind having a larger platform, but I like being able to talk to you guys. I didn't even get into any of the questions about the initial coming, the security guard, why the security guard was dispatched. I didn't even get into any of that. I stuck with the big stuff. I even talked with a few veterans who have spent time in Afghanistan. They spent time in Iraq. These guys know what gunfire sounds like. And as soon as when I asked them, have you listened to any of the footage? What does it sound like to you? Not a single one of them said it sounded like an M16. Not a single one of them said it sounded like an AK. These sound like higher caliber, fully automatic weapons. I'm just saying, there's way too many holes in this story. Way too many things that we're not being told. If they wanted to squelch all of these people questioning the holes in their story, they would give more information. Honestly, Slick, to me, it didn't really... An M60 has a little more of a thump. It sounded like it had a little more of a crack to a 240. But, again, that's just me. I think it had a little more... To me, it sounded a little more... It didn't sound as heavy as an M60, but it definitely sounded heavier than an M16 or an AK. It had a bit of a crack to it. A 240 has a bit of a crack. An M60's got a little more of a thump behind it. I mean, it's got some power behind an M60. Oh, I totally forgot. I didn't even get to the oil tankers. And I haven't... This was just in... Here...
You got 3 minutes.
Okay, so ask your question about the tracer. You had a question about what a tracer is. Okay, so a tracer round, the tip of the bullet has this coating on it that, as it's fired from the gun, the tip of it lights up. Okay. And it glows. So as it's going down range, you can see where it's going to hit. Well, across the street, there are some jet fuel storage tanks, and they are supposedly investigating these tanks, saying that they have been shot at. And they're saying that these could have been incendiary rounds, being one of these tracer rounds. Whoever was firing these weapons needed to know where they were going, and if that's what they were trying to do, was initially hit these jet fuel tanks to cause an explosion, that would have hurt a lot more people.
Yeah. So is that where they got sloppy, maybe?
This whole thing was sloppy.
I know, but maybe that was their plan and it just didn't work because they had
because
so much sloppiness.
Because they had no clue that they were going to need more. I mean, we're not even going to get into the idea that he had explosive, or had the materials to build the explosives supposedly in his car. Again, that's all hearsay. He could have easily parked that across over where those jet fuel tanks were. He could have shot at the car. He could have rigged it with a cell phone device. Rookie mistakes. Let me echo what Slick is saying. Those tanks are 1,200 meters out from the hotel, way beyond the range of an M4. Again, an M4 is basically a snubbed-down version of an M16. It doesn't have the same length of barrel. All the lower receiver, upper receiver, all that stuff is basically the same. If the tanks were penetrated, it was 7.62 or bigger. And no, not AK rounds, which fire 7.62, but a 7.62 and a 7.62 are not the same. Anyway, I would let Slick get into that. He knows about grain and weight and he knows about the length and all that stuff. That's my gun expert. Okay, what did you say we got for time?
38 seconds.
We got 38 seconds. We have enough time to... Here's what we're going to do. We're going to continue on the show for you guys, the viewers. We're going to end it for the podcast portion, so our affiliates that are out there that pick it up, that they have, that they get their show. So, here's what we're going to do. We'll continue here in just a second, so stay tuned. That's all the time we have for this week, ladies and gentlemen. God willing, the Stafford Voice will be back next week. You can follow us over on the Twitter or Gab at Stafford Voice. Look us up on Facebook or Instagram. All you got to do is look for the Stafford Voice. Email your questions, comments, or concerns to thestaffordvoice@gmail.com. I want to thank you so much for your time listening to this, and it was just a mind dump. Again, a lot of questions, a lot of holes. Until next week, thanks, and God bless.